Hello and welcome to an amazingly important and cool virtual event with Tattered Cover. My name is Adam. I'm the director of events at Tattered Cover, and I just want to welcome you to this virtual event. We're still doing them. And if you don't know, for all of you out there, Tattered Cover is 50 years old, and it's thanks to readers like you out there in the internet land and the authors that are our guests tonight, people like them who have just kept us around for half a century. The reason why this isn't so important is because debuts make the world go round. I firmly believe that. I love debut authors. I love discovering emerging writers. Debuts to Devour with Tattered Cover started as an initiative back in June with our book buyer, Kathy Baum, and myself, who just started talking about how do we get emerging writers, people whose names you may not know, into the hands of readers. And the culmination is our first event. We hope this is a series. And I just want to thank everyone for joining. This was our most registered event all year. So thank you so much. I'm just going to introduce the guests and we'll get started because you're not here for me. You're here for them. Our three guests tonight are Jean Kwak, Mina Seçkin, and Rachel Yoder. Jean Kwak has published fiction and nonfiction, both in print and online at the Los Angeles Review of Books, The Rumpus, Wigleaf, Hobart, Electric Literature, and many, many more. He's also in the Flash anthology Forward 21st Century Flash Fiction. He teaches at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. Mina Seçkin's work has been published in McSweeney's Quarterly Concern, The Rumpus, and elsewhere. She serves as the managing editor of a poetry journal. And Rachel Yoder is a graduate of the Iowa Nonfiction Writing Program and also holds an MFA in fiction from the University of Arizona. Her writing has been awarded with the Editor's Prize of Fiction by the Missouri Review and other notable distinctions with the Best American Short Stories and Best American Non-Required Reading. She's also the founding editor of Draft, a journal of process. Please welcome all three debut writers, Jean, Mina, and Rachel.
Thanks so much, Adam.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. And for those out there who don't know, I also run a website and podcast called Debutiful, where you can discover debut authors. And I featured all three of these writers on the site in one way or another. So I want to thank them for joining us again, or joining me again tonight. I've bugged them many times throughout the year. Their books, for those who don't know, Go Home Rookie by Jean Kwak, For Humors by Mina Seçkin, and the best title of the year, probably, I really love it, Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder. I love saying it. Welcome all. Thank you again so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Yes, and what we're going to do tonight for everyone out there is we're going to have them all read, and then we'll start talking about their books afterwards. I just want them to all read first. We're going to start with Jean. So Mina and Rachel, you could stay on so we can see your faces, or you can mute yourselves again. I know that was weird to just come on. But Jean, I want to start with you. Go Home Rookie. Could you tell readers what it's about from your perspective, and then give us a little reading?
Sure. Yeah, Go Home Rookie is about an young independent wrestler from Omaha, Nebraska. He has this terrible in-ring accident at the fairly beginning of the book, and it's not like a spoiler. And then that accident causes him to his wrestling identity to be stripped away, along with other facets of who he thought he was. So much of his persona is built up on him believing that he's half Native American. So a lot of the book is just him grappling with, once a lot of that identity gets stripped away due to the accident, like, who is he? And so he goes on a journey with his mother on this cross-country road trip to try to find his father, to just get some of his questions answered. So I'll read a little bit real quick. I just want to again say thanks to Adam for doing this. It's really, really appreciative of like highlighting debuts. And then obviously thanks to Rachel and Mina. Also, if y'all don't know, today's technically Mina's release date, which is amazing too. So glad to be celebrating that. I'm just gonna read a quick chapter. And this is when Ricky's like on the road and he's just thinking about land and whatnot. Nebraska's pretty flat, although not as flat as Kansas. About Kansas, I once heard someone say that you could watch your dog run away from you for 3 days straight. The highways and interstates through the middle of the country ease my mind. It's not a scenic drive, point at the postcard beauty, but it's definitely a zen, clear-headed kind of scroll. Drives out east are too bumper to bumper near big cities. Also, there are way too many tolls. I once paid $17.15 in Ohio because I pulled over at a rest stop to get a slice of cold pizza. The drive down south is more picturesque, but it doesn't let you exist in your own head. You're always peering at a river town in Arkansas or leering at weirdos in Louisiana. Go past a panhandle in Nebraska, and you're automatically in the mountains, purple in their majesty. But that boring block in the Midwest that most doze through is my favorite part. I'm probably biased because I've spent so many years zigzagging through them. Come across a horizon of waving grain, and I want to pull over and run toward it until I can't see any more road, where there's nothing but green and yellow patchwork grass and the rest of the world seems swallowed up. Whenever I'd pass through Boston or Connecticut for a wrestling bid, they'd be amazed that road trips that we took were regularly 12 to 15 hours or more. The East is so scrunched, I was once in Massachusetts when they blared a tornado warning for a twister in Connecticut. Also, the skies in the Midwest beat all. They're so wide open. My grandpa grew up near the ocean in Oregon, and although I never knew him that well, he taught me how to skip rocks and tie a jig. After he and grandma split, he's been living in Oklahoma for 40 years. And whenever he sees a big body of water, he goes back to being a boy. I get it. Now, Nebraska raised, landlocked, no coast. But the sky is what calls to me. When I'm in a big city, especially out east, I hate how the sky is always encumbered by a dumbass building budging into my periphery. Get the fuck out of here, you goddamn rectangle. Also, because Nebraska's next to Iowa, land of the wind turbine, it's not rare to see the flashing lights of a wide load caravan rushing past you on the highway, followed by a blade or two from a turbine. Even though they're man-made, there's something awesome about being close to something that big. I imagine that's what it's like to come across a beached whale carcass and roll by its bones. I once worked for 4 weeks on a quick run crew maintaining those turbines on a wind farm, and I still get goose flesh seeing them disassembled and roaring down the highway. The whole trip was a trip. You get fully geared up, hard hat, hooks and straps, pass a climbing test. I had to learn how to climb without tiring out my arms. And the trick is, don't pull yourself up so much as you pull yourself toward the ladder. Nothing like seeing the world from that perch. All those slow blades spinning like there's nothing more important than the next breeze. It's easy to take all that flat land for granted until you see it from the eyes of someone full of wonder. I remember when the Intertribal Council kids were planning a bake sale to raise money to visit an out-of-state powwow. They also wanted to hit the Mid-America All Indian Center in Wichita. It's a 5-hour drive that cuts straight down through Kansas, none too beautiful as far as American vistas go. But when they returned, they couldn't stop talking about how incredible it was. Holy shit, Ricky, Pilgrim said. All that space? He spread his arms wide. Most of them had rarely had the opportunity to travel. Some had never set foot on an airplane. A few never went beyond the borders of Nebraska or Iowa. Even Kansas was alien to them. And although I'd covered those roads so many times, I sat back and listened to how they were dazzled by the same pastures. I couldn't help but see them fresh, like when a wide-eyed child gets excited and describes blue to you in a new way. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you so much, Gene, for reading that. The basic pitch for Gene's book is it's about a wrestler. By what he was reading, you clearly know it's about a lot more, and it's very introspective. We're going to switch from the Midwest to abroad with Mina's book, The Four Humors, which, like Gene said, is officially out today. It got pushed back because of the supply chain, which reminds me, if you're going to order books from your independent bookstore, you should do it now and not a week before Christmas or Hanukkah or whatever you're buying books for, because if we don't have it, you might not get it. Mina, The Four Humors, I read this such a long time ago. It is one of the most gorgeous book covers, and also the writing is also gorgeous. Tell readers what the Four Humors is about and give us a little reading.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. This is really amazing. So the Four Humors is about a Turkish American girl who goes to Istanbul to stay with her grandma to take care of her, to grieve her dad's death, and supposedly to study for the MCAT. However, she does not want to do any of those things. It's not actually that she doesn't want to, she just can't do any of those things. Her blonde American boyfriend also comes with her, and he's very earnest and really absorbs the country in this way that she's very suspicious of. And while she's there, she develops a chronic headache and becomes obsessed with the Four Humors theory of ancient medicine in order to diagnose herself. And so, for example, she really believes that she has an excess of black bile, which is melancholy, running through her body, and that is the cause for her physical and emotional turmoil. There are other humors like choler, which makes you angry, blood, which makes you kind of like so happy. It's kind of toxic positivity, to be honest, blood. And then there's phlegm, which makes you sluggish and a bit, you're kind, but you're a bit boring. So Sibel, the narrator, comes across some family secrets, and yeah, I guess that's all I'll say. I'll read from the beginning. The four humors that pump through my body determine my character, temperament, mood. Blood, phlegm, black bile, and choler. The excess or lack of these body fluids designates how a person should be. I don't know what choler means, and when I Google it, the internet leads me to a link asking whether choler is a Scrabble word. What is choler? Asked Cooper when I report my findings. We're at my grandmother's, where she is resting. She's tired from shopping for bargains on towels all day. The windows open and a breeze moves through the apartment, carrying cat, gull, and car sounds from the street into the room. Because my grandmother is napping, Cooper and I can lounge on her sofa together, and we can even touch arms. We search bodily fluids online, and Hippocrates, who first worked this theory out. He was born in Kos, a Greek island off the coast of Turkey, and Cooper and I soon learned that humorism was practiced primarily in this geographical region and became very popular in the Islamic Golden Age. Cooper and I have been in Istanbul for 2 weeks now. We're here for the summer, me to take care of my grandmother and to see my father's grave, him to see that I do these things. Before we came to Turkey, my mother set some ground rules. I would stay at my grandmother's apartment in Levant, and Cooper would rent a room 2 neighborhoods over at the top of Bebek's Hill. No sharing a bed, no kissing in public, because the real Turks won't do that openly. We kiss instead when we are alone in the room Cooper is renting near the eye hospital where he's working. I was supposed to volunteer at a hospital too until my headaches began. Choler, it turns out, is yellow bile, and in excess can compel even the most calm and gentle person into a hot-tempered rage. Phlegm makes you sleepy and sluggish, but you are also known for your dependable nature. Black bile is melancholy, and blood is the best humor. Blood pumps you into a kind and optimistic person. Wow, says Cooper. He hovers his finger over my computer screen to point out a warning that too much optimism can make you insensitive to those around you, apathetic even. We agree that many people suffer from this blood condition. We agree that although this topic is interesting, it may not explain my headaches, and we agree that my grandmother's Parkinson's cannot be explained away as phlegm. The humorous theory prevailed until the 19th century when another man discovered germs, Louis Pasteur, who laid the framework for medical sterility and sanitation. But I believe in fluids more than germs, even though I'm supposed to become a doctor. They say that Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque, who was visited by Christ in a year-long string of revelations in the 1670s, suffered from an excess of blood. She was his chosen instrument, Saint Margaret said, but she could not convince the others to believe her. Christ asked her to initiate the Feast of the Sacred Heart. Christ permitted her to lay her head on his radiant, torn-up chest. To cure her delusions, the priest decided to bleed her out once a month. They would cut her white thigh and have her sit in a stone basin. But my understanding of Christianity is limited and mostly Googled. I am unsure what they did with her blood. The second time we go to the hospital, a woman enters the exam room and motions for my grandmother to sit down. I smile graciously at her. Her eyes are a rare blue for a Turk. She is a doctor. My grandmother resists. Oh, but I'm not seeing you today. She is. I'm not sick, I say. What? Asked my grandmother. Who is sick? Asked the doctor. I have Parkinson's, says my grandmother, but I'm taking my medication. Okay, I announce. Maybe I am sick. I don't know with what. I also have palpitations, my grandmother confesses. The doctor is very confused. Who is sick? She repeats, suddenly very stern. Me, I say. We're here for me. I have a chronic headache. The doctor brings me to a small changing room and hands me a white gown and slippers. My grandmother is behind the door. She asks me if I want her to come in. That's okay, I say. Thank you. I am told to remove my necklace before climbing onto the flat bed and entering the white tube. The necklace belonged to my mother, and from its gold chain hangs an Arabic prayer, the one Baba taught me. The necklace was given to my mother by her mother, a woman who has been dead for years. I never met this mother, but I've been told she was fat and fond of discipline. I dip this chain under my shirt's neckline each time I'm at an airport, but in New York bodegas, the men behind the counters read the prayer I carry and nod. When American friends or strangers reach out and touch it, I can always feel their hand on my chest, near my neck, as they ask me what it means. I have to stay in the MRI this time because I had to pay up front and drain my savings, and I don't want to further disappoint my grandmother. She's the one who's sick, after all. I will myself to feel as calm as the white steel tube reads me. I think of ways to distract myself. I make up stories of me dispelling black bile from my body by taking laxatives, but an image of Cooper floats in, and he is very worried about my well-being. I get bored. I begin counting the seconds on my hands with my fingers in groups of 10, because this is the only way to get your brain read without having your brain walk out on you.
Thank you so much, Mina. And again, congratulations on your book coming out a week later than it was supposed to, but it is out in the world. And thank you for spending your publication night with us. It means a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me.
And then we'll switch over to one more reading before I start asking them all the burning questions about what it's like to be a debut writer in their books. Rachel Yoder, like I said, Night Bitch, just my favorite title to say. I just love saying it. Tell readers a little bit about what this weird and amazing book is, and then dive right into your reading.
Sure. Thanks so much, Adam. And thank you to Jean and Mina for those wonderfully compelling excerpts. So yeah, good old Night Bitch. What is she all about? The premise of the book is it is about an one-time ambitious artist turned reluctant stay-at-home mom who becomes convinced she's turning into a dog. And so the very short excerpt I'm going to read comes about midway through the book, after the mother, who is only referred to as the mother or Night Bitch. Her doggish whims have gotten a bit out of control, and she has done something violent and animalistic that scares her very much. So this is right after that has happened, and she's sort of trying to come back from it and figuring out what comes next and how she's going to deal with this transformation that's overtaken her and how she's going to keep it under control. And her son saw this act of violence. She watched her son closely that week to see if there would be any residual trauma from what he had seen. She searched the internet for kids who have seen violence, and the boy did not appear to have any of the symptoms. No odd aches, no bad dreams, no separation anxiety, not that they were ever separated, or moments of aggression, other than the ordinary doggy snarls. Just giggles and cartoons and crashing his cars together in the living room, dumping buckets of sand from the sandbox on the lawn, and then raking the sand into the grass with his little boy-sized rake. No, he seemed fine, but still, she took him twice that week to get ice cream at the stand down by the river, and they threw rocks into the flat, muddy ripples. They went to the park with the old amusement rides, and they rode the toy train 8 times, each time in the caboose, the boy never tiring of it and crying when she told him she was out of tickets and it was time to go. The next day, in a continuing effort to make headway and turn over a new leaf, Night Bitch sat at her son's tiny plastic table in the kitchen and wrote 10 things I want to do before I die, in all caps, on the back of a piece of construction paper covered in crayon scribbles. It was an excruciating self-help exercise, one she would never, ever reveal to another soul, but still. Her son sat in a large casserole dish full of unpopped popcorn, plastic trowel in hand. He wiggled his bare feet in the kernels and laughed. There was a baking sheet beside him, various spoons, plastic bowls, and many, many kernels strewn nearly to the living room. Night Bitch stared at the sink full of dishes without seeing them. 10 things. Good God, she couldn't even think of one. Lose 10 pounds, she wrote lamely, then stopped. Did she really have no desires anymore? No deep passions? Where had the vitriolic emotions and sweeping gestures of her 20s disappeared to? Oh God, what did she want to do? There had to be something. She forced herself to jot down anything, blindly, just go. And so she scrawled, I want to run naked through a meadow and catch a rabbit and snap its neck and then rip its throat open and drink the warm blood from the wound. And I want to tell the truth. I want to hump legs. I want to chase horses around a barnyard and make them whinny and kick up dust. I want to be in a church choir and wear a robe, but instead of singing, I just howl all my hymn notes loud as I can. I want to never brush my hair ever again. I want to wear the same linen dress for a year. I want to stink. I want to run and run and run into the cornfields all the way to a stream and then follow it to the ocean. I'm sorry, I'm not coming back. And I want to have very, very passionate sex with a stranger. And I want to sit on a fully decorated cake without underwear. And I want to perform a large anonymous act of extreme vandalism. And I want to be an artist and a woman and a mother. I mean, a monster. I want to be a monster. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rachel. Your book, whenever I pitch it to people, it's like, and like you said, it's about a mother who turns into a dog, maybe. Like it's a good one-line pitch. I'll start asking questions, and for all the viewers out there, please put questions in the YouTube chat. I will get to it, and we'll make sure Rachel, Mina, and Jean will answer them. I'll start with this question for all of you. Rachel, I'll have you start first since you're already unmuted. One thing that I love having debut authors share is the story of how long this took, because I think a lot of readers out there, they think like, oh, Stephen King puts out a book a year, it's easy. How long did Night Bitch, how long did The Four Humors, how long did Go Home Ricky take all of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I really started writing in earnest in 2017. But we might also count the 2 years before that when I didn't write as part of the genesis of this book. And that was 3 years where I was not writing consistently. I was writing in chunks, really intense chunks. So I would write 1,000 words a day for a couple weeks and then wouldn't write for a couple months and then would go back to it simply because that's how my life was structured. That made a lot more sense and the responsibilities of my life. Yeah, and I think then toward the end, when I was nearing like the completion of a draft, I started writing more consistently because I really wanted to finish it. And it was like almost physically painful. And I just like pushed through to the end. It was sort of like if I were a long distance runner, I would imagine like the same feeling when you're coming to like the end of a marathon. You're like, just go, just keep going, just keep going. Yeah, so a 3 to 5 year process for me.
Mina, what was it like for you? I know your book was delayed a week officially. Was there a lot of delays while you were writing?
I really love Rachel's phrase, writing in earnest, especially writing a particular project in earnest, because I feel like that happens to me a lot where a project will be in my mind, but I haven't truly given it everything. I haven't experienced that feeling where I just want it to be done. With this book, I had originally written it as a short story in 2016. and I had submitted it to workshop in my MFA program. It was the first story I submitted. And as I was looking at everyone's feedback, I kept writing more scenes, but I still put it away, and I didn't keep writing it. It wasn't until 2018 that I started, or yeah, the very beginning of 2018 that I started it in earnest. And I really like threw myself into it. And I think it took about a year and a half. But then so many stages of revisions. Like I still changed major things up until while editing with my editor. So I really do feel like it was 2018 to 2021 even. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. All the books kind of have it seems like a similar timeline, because I mean, I got done with grad school in 2011, and then to be honest with you, without giving away all the details, from like 2011 to like 2018, I was writing these little flash pieces or whatever, almost like for fun, but we were just like hanging out with buddies and like being too social and partying, you know. Omaha at one point was rated like the drunkest city in America or something. It's not, you know. And so, yeah, I was not focused on, you know, my writing. I wasn't focused on a project. And then what happened was in 2018, beginning of 2018. So it's funny how similar the timelines run. I was doing adjunct work, and then I was like a runner-up again for a full-time position. And at that point I was just burnt out. I was like, man, I can't keep doing this, you know, I can't keep going through this hamster wheel of adjuncting or whatever. So I was like, fuck it, I gotta focus on my own shit. And so I ended up just like crafting like maybe 50 to 75 pages. And then I submitted them to the Yale Writers Workshop and then Tin House, both in the same summer. And then that catapulted my connection to my agent and all this other stuff that ended up snowballing from that. But and then I just kept on powering through from like 2018 on, and then came up with a draft and then subsequent revisions and whatnot. So yeah, it's really, I think it is important to, like, you know, not diminish that downtime, but like sometimes this is necessary because of life, you know. So
What, for all three of you, what made this project stick for you? What made it worth going back to writing and really going in earnest to completing these specific projects? Mina, you're unmuted. I'll pick on you.
Okay. For me, I definitely feel like it was simply the voice. I just really was obsessed with the voice. Sibel was a really interesting character to write, because although she's withholding, she also is constantly picking apart everything around her. And so it was very fun to write her. And I got to access a lot of darker, meaner parts of myself. So I think that's always fun to go through.
Yeah, going off of that, the engine of this book was rage, and it was pouring out of me post 2016 election in many ways. I mean, this is a Trump era book that started and kept going in part from the anger of what was happening in the country. And I think also I was really struck by Night Bitch's ability and enthusiasm for ranting. And so it felt really great to write those first 50 to 75 pages. They just rolled right on out of me. And I really was compelled to hear what Night Bitch's manifesto was, because the book felt like this sort of righteous manifesto by, you know, a woman in 2017. And so that was what carried me into it and through it. I was also, you know, I have 2 MFAs, and I didn't have a book, and I was nearing 40, and I had a kid, and I was like, Rach, this is your book. If you do not write this, there's going to be a problem. So like, get it done. Like, follow the voice. Do not abandon this. So I just had a lot of incentive to keep going.
yeah, that's great, Rachel. Mine's kind of almost a combination of the two. mine wasn't from necessarily a place of rage, but it was from a place of like wanting to write a character that could just rant and riff. But also similarly to Mina, like the voice. And I understand, if you're writing a piece that has like heavy trauma or something, there's just going to be some days where it's really difficult to put yourself back in the seat and come back to the page. But even the difficult or hard scenes were like fun for me because the voice was like so engaging. There were so many like weird rants that Ricky went on that I just had to cut because they didn't make sense, even though they're like hilarious to me. I'm like, damn, I really want to leave in that joke about whatever, but for the purposes of the narrative, I'd have to cut. So it was just fun. Like it's almost kind of a combination of the two. And then the other thing, just alluding back to like my situation at the time, is I just felt desperation, like kind of what Rachel was talking about. I was just like, I can't keep doing this adjunct thing. I was getting a little bit older, and like, the MFA had started to sort of recede in my memory. And like I said, like it's real easy. Omaha is a real easy city to just like hang out with friends, and it's cheap to live here, and you can kind of just settle in that and just exist in that space for a while. And I did, and I was like, I gotta pull myself out of this, and I gotta really dedicate myself to this. So
all three of you talked about how the voice is really what propelled you to write this book. There's a question from Den Mouse, specifically about like, how did you come up with the idea for the plot of these books? The voice was there, but how did you decide where this voice was going to go within the pages of your book? Gene, I'll pick on you.
Yeah, I can go real quick. I'm not a plotter. Like I can't, I'm not a planner. Even my students are like, come on, Gene. I'm just not a planning ass person. Like it's just not in my nature. My car looks like a mess on the inside. You know what I mean? I'm just like a messy ass person. And so I can't, like I bought Scrivener, I don't know, 2 years ago. I've never even opened it. You know what I mean? I've always thought about like, and each project will be different. So who knows if the next novel will warrant me having to plot sections of it out. But I would just create this character and this premise, and then I would think about like, what do I want to acknowledge? What do I want to talk about? Things like masculinity and whiteness, etc. And I would throw in other characters and just see how they played on the page, and then cut and revise and cut and revise. And like literally every time I wrote and sat back down to write, I would read everything again just to get back into that voice. So I had to just do it little by little, little by little. So I just had, the only thing that I knew for sure was like this particular action that Ricky takes in the book towards the end, without giving it away. I knew he was going to get there. I just had to figure out like how to get there.
Before the other two jump in, why wrestling though? Like, because it's why use that as the vessel for his story?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of goes back to even what Rachel was talking about. I just wanted a character that could like riff and rant, and I mean, to be honest with you, like I think all of us have been lucky and been getting great reviews, but there was one review that said something about how, and it was really like congratulatory and like really, it was like heaping praise in all these other ways, but it was also like something about how could this voice come from like a working class person? And I was like, bro, that's not even a good critique. That's just a classist issue. You know what I mean? One of the most eloquent people I know used to deal crack. You know what I'm saying? So like the idea that somebody who's working class couldn't rant and like riff and be witty is like, but I just wanted to write this character who would have this idea of like this persona that he's living, and then like how he's existing in real life. And that's wrestling in a nutshell, so.
And Mina, how did you decide on a Turkish American young lady going to Turkey with her boyfriends to hang out with her grandma?
What a great question, because so much of my book is, I wouldn't call it autofiction, but taking and pulling from things that are my experience and then creating the story out of that. I would say like I knew that was always going to be the story that I wanted to tell first. And it's almost as if like the tension within me and the not within me is understanding this dual identity and trying to understand why I feel so much in that country, and why I feel not Turkish there, and why I feel not fully American here. And so untying that knot really created a lot of the plot. but like Jean was saying, I had a conception of what I wanted the plot to be, but I just had to figure out how to get there. And with getting there, I feel like there's a lot of not finding it and not knowing how you're going to get to that exact plot or like create that connective tissue until you're walking around and doing something totally random and then it comes to you. And that's where the iPhone note app is very handy. Yeah.
Rachel, I know based on what I mean, I've also talked to you numerous times throughout the year, so I know this answer, but based on what you said tonight, like Night Bitch is very similar to what you were going through in real life, not writing, not like, but why Night Bitch? How did she, why a woman who turns into a dog?
Why not, Adam?
Yes,
Why not? I thought it was a bad idea, yet fun and challenging. And I just kind of said, fuck it, and went for it. And so I had those first, 50 to 70 pages, and they made an arc, like a short story does. And I was like, oh no, is this a novella? Is this just like a really long, unpublishable short story? What have I done? And then I thought about that, that Flannery O'Connor's The Situation and the Story. And I was like, okay, this is the situation. Like I've set up the situation and we end at sort of like the end of like a plot point, right? So then I started thinking about it in terms of screenwriting structure, that I had the first third of the book that sets up the story and this sets up the situation. And now something has to kind of happen out of that. So then I sort of set what the midpoint would be. And I wrote toward that. And then once I got to the midpoint, I set what I kind of had an idea of what would happen at the end, but I didn't know how I'd get there. And then I wrote toward that. So, like you both said, I needed something to sort of write toward. And I just did what I knew how to do with the first 50 pages and then was like, oh, now this is going to be a novel. How do I make a novel go? So I just used what I did know with screenwriting to kind of get me through.
Mm-hmm. I'll ask this question now from the audience because you mentioned screenwriting. Jenny asks, have you considered writing other types of work, screenplays, plays, poetry? And if so, how did you decide to focus on long form prose? And Rachel, I'll start with you because I know you're currently working, or maybe you're done by this point, on a screenplay.
I'm done. Yeah, that that got turned in about a month before the book came out. Mm-hmm. I mean, I wanted to go to film school before I wanted to go to creative writing school, but I didn't know how to make a movie. I didn't have like the tools and the resources for making a movie to get into film school. So I decided to write. So I've always been interested in screenwriting and took screenwriting courses at my MFA. So I don't know, I guess it just seems like in terms of the learning process, you sort of learn how to craft flash fiction and short stories. And then the next learning hurdle is like, okay, how do I do a novel? And scripts seem like a whole different world, and they are to a large degree. Like, and I think we're all coming out of like an MFA world, which is really preparing you to write prose, preparing you to like become part of the academy in a certain sense. But I am wide open. I will write. I am here to learn. Like, I'm just saying yes to everything. Yes, I would love to write a script. Like, yes, I would love to do whatever comes next. Yeah.
Mina, do you want me to go? Do you?
I can go. Yeah,
Go.
Yeah, I also find that switching between genres, which I don't do often, but when I do them, it helps me so much. It helps me understand why I'm writing fiction, but also it helps me understand exactly how I, in particular, gravitate, what kind of techniques I gravitate towards in fiction. I played around with writing a random script, and I was blown away by how much more visual you have to be, but how much more directly visual you have to be. You have to point out every single thing that's going on. Whereas in fiction, you get to imply a lot more. And that helped me so much. It literally made me feel like I could see so much more when I was writing fiction on my own. And it's funny because I came to writing fiction from poetry, and they could not be more different. Poetry and screenwriting, I feel like, could not be more different, but poetry really helped me in fiction in just like really really caring about the weight of each word and the rhythm in each sentence. And I feel like that is always going to be my biggest obsession. But yeah, I'm also open to anything, especially because it just expands how you conceive of the power of language and the story that you want to tell.
Yeah, I started writing poetry when I was younger, and then I was like, I might as well give it a shot with this story, with this like longer form storytelling thing. And then it was just fun, like writing short story. I thought I was going to be like a short story writer because I romanticize short stories. Some of my favorite writers are short story writers primarily. So I always thought I was going to work in the short story form until this particular project like necessitated me writing a novel. And then I was like, damn, this is fun as hell. And I was like, I don't know if I want to go back, because I could just riff for these like long passages, and so, my brain right now is definitely in like novel writing mode, but like I'm really flexible. I think, yeah, even what Mina was talking about with regard to, I think I even when I'm writing in a narrative sense, I'm thinking like very cinematically. And I try to make the writing vivid, et cetera, action filled or whatever. So it'd be an interesting endeavor, but I'm like super, super locked in right now on the novel form.
Earlier, you all mentioned kind of the editing process, or you touched upon it, and I know I could tell based on the screening that this is Ruth Medievsky. I'm sorry if I pronounced your name, but she has a debut novel coming out in next year, The All Night Pharmacy. She asks, what advice do y'all have for a debut novelist deep in the revision stage on their novel that's under contract? And then she added, weird how having a book deal doesn't make the anxiety go away. But what advice do you have for someone deep in revision right now? I'll ask you because I know this book's coming out on Catapult and your book's out on Catapult. So I'll ask you first.
Yeah, and also with my same editor. I'm really excited to read Ruth's book. And what advice would I have? Honestly, I'm not sure if my advice would help anxiety much, because I really did treat every draft that once I was finished editing a draft and would send it in, I would feel like, okay, that's it. That's the final form. Like I would have to work that hard, but also torture my perfectionist brain before I sent that draft in. And so I guess my advice would be to let go of some of that perfectionism. At the same time, I can't advise that as a perfectionist because I will keep doing it. So I'm sorry, I'm not very helpful, Ruth.
I think I'm the other extreme, wherein I kind of wish I would have been a little bit more of a perfectionist, because I was at the point where I'm just like, I am done. Like, I am done looking at this. I cannot reread this book one more time. It's not happening. It is physically painful. You want to make some changes? Cool. What are the changes you want to make? Like, accept all. I was just like sort of out of my mind. And I think I was also beginning to write the script at the same time I was editing. So they all just kind of passed by in a haze. And especially getting in to writing the script and thinking about how the script became like a deep revision of the book. And I did have some regrets as I like moved through the script. I was like, oh, I wish I would have like had the time and like wherewithal to do a deep revision, because the script was really like showing me new things that could have happened in the book. Yeah, so I was on the total other end of the spectrum where I was kind of like, I'm up for anything, wasn't feeling like really controlling, and sort of wish that I would have like been more present for the edits that were coming through. But I do think the thing I always tried to stay with was, does this edit like sit right in my body? Like in my gut, is this like, like, is this a good edit for the book or not? And always trying to defer to like what I wanted, as opposed to feeling pressure from an editor or like copy editor even to do things a certain way. I just kept telling myself, I'm the author. I know how I want it. And it's always like a balancing act of that, right? Because you don't want to like be a prima donna either. But yeah.
Yeah,
I would
that's
have
what
loved to have that energy. Sorry.
yeah. I just I don't know if I have any good advice either. I would just say like, take your time. Obviously you're working on a deadline, but take your time. But yeah, like Rachel was talking about, make sure that you're sitting okay and you're sitting right with the edits, because once the final pass happens, and then it's over. I know writers who are like, I wanted to make changes after that, and it's like, unfortunately, what's done is done at a certain point. And you also have to make peace with, even talking about the perfectionist thing, like all of us are like great sentence writers, and the thing about it is, you're going to hear the music differently later on anyway. I'm sure all of us, when we're reading things, we're like, man, I change little sentences as I'm reading it. So sometimes in the reading, it's a little bit different than it is on the page. And you're just going to have to feel okay. It's as good as you're able to take it to a certain point, and you have to find peace with that, because like, you might look at it like 20 years down the line and like change some of the sentences or whatever. But, you have to find that peace, that inner peace. I don't know if that's good advice at all, but
No, that's so good.
Oh, Adam, you're muted.
Building off the revision process, we have a question from Amanda, who says, my impression of the editing process is that it's brutal. But she wants to know, how far away from your original ideas is the finished product? Was editing, what was editing like? Is it completely different than when you kind of started?
I have a really quick answer in that Nightbitch didn't go through like a lot, like a big upheaval of an edit ever. It was more sort of taking particular narrative threads and moving them up earlier, and kind of like, it was this sort of logistical work, which I find infuriating. And it's like administrative work. I was not under the impression there would be administrative work in my novel. And yet, it was like, okay, I think my agent at one point made me write a whole timeline. This might have been for the script. They're all blending together now, but like write out I think it was for the book. I had to write a timeline of where everything happened, which was incredibly painful and incredibly useful. But yeah, so there was just sort of administrative work and then messing with certain sections, but there was never a sort of like, you need to rethink like these 80 pages and completely rewrite them, which I was very grateful for.
Yeah, mine too didn't have anything a giant rework. There was kind of a clunkiness in the middle, sort of, and I was really grateful when my editor saw perfectly that an entire like 20 pages could be cut and it would solve a huge problem. And I actually I love cutting things, and I never get very attached to, say, parts. I don't know. I can cut things very easily. And there were a lot of logistical things for me too, where when I had first sold the book, it wasn't set in a particular year in Turkey, right? And there were a lot of different events that were actual events that happened just in the past like 6 years of like a violent history, of recent history. And rereading it, I was like, I actually really want this to be in 2014 because it really does feel like it's in 2014. And I feel like that's such an important year for Turkey's politics. And also it captures this time before Trump when people were just blindly loving Obama too. It was this perfect time when, I don't know, when Trump was just Trump was actually everywhere around us in 2014, but we didn't know. So I really wanted to be in 2014, and I had to do a similar, making sure every single event that happens actually happened in 2014, and then trying to make sure all the events in the past in Turkey and the family history allowed for everyone's ages to be about the same. So there was a lot of timeline stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so funny. Same. I hate that kind of stuff. When I'm writing, I'm like, wait, how old is this motherfucker?
Yeah.
Basic shit that I forgot to write down. But the biggest editorial thing, my editor at Overlook, Tracy, was like, great, big picture stuff. But the biggest major edit was actually when I was working on it with my agent, Sarah, and she's, and I trusted her because she was an editor at 2 big presses for 10 years. And I trust her eye. And she was like, why don't we see if we can add this other element? Just give it a shot. And I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot. And so I ended up changing, I don't know, 50 or 75 pages, moving stuff around on mine. She didn't ask for that, but I thought that her change was really smart. And then I moved a bunch of stuff around and rewrote a bunch of stuff. But that was even before we sent it out. And so, yeah.
At the top of the hour, you all mentioned voice was super important. That's kind of the driving force for your novel. What's maybe the second most important thing to do when writing? I'm obsessed with pace recently. I just don't have time to read a book that has a lull anymore, just mostly because I'm reading so many books for what events we're going to do, what Day Beautiful is going to cover. What's also important to you other than voice?
I can go real quick if y'all want. I would just say character is the I don't know if it's second most important, but it's up there. Everything, I just want people that are going to jump off the page, that are going to, at least for the project that I'm working on. As a reader, I appreciate all different types of narratives, things that are more sort of maybe a slower paced or whatever. But when I'm writing, I'm going to try to write, characters that feel maybe even more hyper real in a lot of ways, just because I want, that excitement. And so that's a really important thing. And that's even in my, I was talking about the plotting process. It's I'll just create these characters and they just kind of, bump up against each other and see how it all works out. So that's kind of the other thing that really makes me excited to work and come back to the page.
Yeah, same. For me too, character is 100%. Not as important as voice, but just as important as voice, and folds in so much into that voice, how, say, your narrator, if it's first person, is viewing those characters. But yeah, they absolutely have to be as fully fleshed as possible, and as funny as possible. But yeah, for me, for example, place is always I never think actively about place. And I find that through focusing on voice and character, place gets filled in. It does, but I will never write more than 3 consecutive sentences about place. I just get very bored. But I really appreciate the writers who do end scenes that are more place forward, but I just can never go into a scene that way.
The first thing that came to mind for me was rhythm and musicality, although I think that's a part of voice. Yeah, but there's something about the way that you're taken into a story via its rhythms and then kept there. You can't stop reading because the book is singing you a song and you don't want to turn the song off. Yeah, and I think also for me, formal inventiveness is something that keeps me really interested in writing. I don't know if it's as like interesting for readers, but I want to do something that is really, that this piece of art had to be made as a book. It can't be anything else in the way that it is made right now. So how can I capitalize on all the things that like the novel form has to offer, and play around with that? That's something that is really important to me.
Yeah, I think what you said with rhythm, that's probably what I mean by pace, actually, because my favorite novels are your three obviously have like pace going in the way I'm thinking of it, but I think Electric Literature tweeted out like writing a novel with no plot, just vibes, and that is like those are the type of novels I love. Novels, but the pace, but the rhythm just keeps it going, and all three of your novels have that. All three of your novels also have humor in some way or another, and I just want to ask, how do you balance that? Are you trying to be funny? Is it natural on the page? I mean, even in the darkest times, there's like a laugh in most of your chapters.
I do not try to be funny. I think that dark humor is just a way of life for me and a way of coping. It's like a coping mechanism I picked up. And I think for Night Witch, that was the same. Just I find, her situation was absurd to begin with. And so just really leaning into the absurdity of her situation just came very naturally.
Yeah, ditto. The absurdity in just so many things around me give me joy and also a coping. So that part of the book just happened and the character.
Yeah, I think I do think about it a little bit, but I think I even, Adam, you and I talked about this in the podcast, I believe. I think it's just a part of like how I function in the world. And I think like a lot of Korean people are hella funny. My parents are hella funny. Sometimes you don't see that as much in like some media, but like I think even in the podcast we're talking about, even in things like Squid Game and Parasite that are dark, there are like elements of humor. And even just going back to what Rachel and Mina were talking about, like the absurdity, even in times of darkness, like sometimes you just have to laugh. It's like that thing of like laughing at a funeral sometimes, like the the emotions just bubble out in this weird way. But I do think about it sometimes in the writing process, and sometimes I have to cut back because I'm like, if you're trying too hard for a joke, sometimes it's undercutting other things. And so you're like aiming for this laugh and it's like not the purpose, So sometimes I have to like cut back a little bit.
Definitely. And we'll start wrapping up here. There's a few more questions, and then I have a few more of my own. Jenny again asks, she has another question. And I love this because I feel like this is one reason Day Beautiful exists, for writers like her to ask these questions. Do you have any advice for truly beginning stage authors, people who have not written much? What resources did you use? Did you take advantage of when you first started learning to write?
I can go real quick. This is gonna sound like pretty hokey. Like one quick bit of advice is to like enjoy the process, enjoy the journey. Because I don't know how y'all felt, Rachel and Mina, but once the book was over and like I was going through the promo stuff and it was incredible and fun and it's great to talk about your book, like I did kind of just miss working on the book, like just being in those quiet moments where like almost nobody knows about it and you're just laughing to yourself and having a good time writing on the page. I'm like, I miss that moment and I want to get back to working on something new, like, again, part of the promo stuff, it's part of it and it's fun and it's great, but I just like miss, so like really, really enjoy the process. And then the other thing is like, there are so many more resources now than when we were all probably in our MFA programs. I mean, I just joined as part of the like this mentorship. I don't even know why they added me as a mentor. I'm an idiot, but I'm part of this mentorship of like writers of color, Periplus collective. There's so many different groups online in communities, and so I think that might be a good bit of advice, is like seek out community, fellow writers that can give you feedback, etc.
Yeah, I echo that. After my first MFA, I was living in a manufactured home in a retirement community in Prescott, Arizona. I was pretty lonely. I was very much by myself. And one thing that saved me was finding an online writing community, the indie lit community. There was a site going back then called Fictionaut, like astronaut, but Fictionaut, where you could post work and then people would read it and leave comments. And I know there's much more sophisticated things now. But writing is such a lonely, solitary endeavor that if you can find, even online or around you where you live, a writing group, I think that's really, really helpful to have someone else reading your work, and you're reading other people's work too, who are just beginning, and talking about it. I think too, just experiencing as much art as possible, whether it's reading or film or going to a museum or going to the theater or going to see modern dance, like go and take it all in. Like at the beginning, I mean, even not at the beginning, you're figuring out like what excites you aesthetically. And you always need to sort of be feeding that. Like, what is your artistic sensibility? What is really interesting to you? What risks are interesting to you? And so just considering yourself a member of the artists community, and behaving accordingly. I think it's really wonderful to be a writer, for that reason, is that you get to take part in this brilliant thing that's going on culturally.
Yeah, I love those. Those are really, really beautiful and are so true. Just the sense of finding that community. And I definitely would also add, in terms of surrounding yourself with art, I never think of myself as a writer before I'm a reader. Like they always are together for me. And I know that just eating books has always been the way that I learned what I want to write and learned that I wanted to be a writer. And so, yeah, just to continue reading and continue surrounding yourself with art. I would also add that I feel with my own experience, it's so important to not be afraid to call yourself a writer, and to not be afraid of whatever connotation that might mean, or feeling like, oh, but I don't have anything published. Like, how could I call myself a writer? I feel like that can be it just adds a weight of shame to your practice that isn't helping you create what you need to create. And in reality, nobody cares that you are a writer except for you. So that's why I feel like it's most important to shed that shame.
There's one more question from the audience, and it goes back to when we were talking about voice and character. Gary asks, how do you describe the difference between voice and character? And I think that's a good distinction for readers and writers to make sometimes. Is there a distinction? Are they always linked together? Someone will answer.
I can attempt to just further define, perhaps, but I feel as if voice and character, their differences is really dependent on the perspective. And so if it's a first person narrator, their voice and character are actually very linked together, right? The word choice they have, the things they see, the way they write, the way the first person narrator is expressing themselves through rhythm, word choice, syntax. They are very linked together, but and then a character that they might be describing, that character might have a voice and dialogue. Talking myself into a hole. However, third person narrator is there can be a voice there too, and that is again the omniscient third, who would be again using specific choices with respect to rhythm, word choice, syntax. Yeah,
and I'll just add real quickly, like, if we're if you're writing in first person, obviously the voices, everything's filtered through that first person. But there's a difference between seeing a different character on the page, you as the reader, and like thinking about how the writer's presenting that character versus how the narrator is perceiving that character. There can often be a difference as well. So like Ricky will maybe disagree with some of the actions of other characters, but hopefully you're sensing as the reader that that's not my judgment as a creator. There can be, a separation there as well.
Yeah, just to add a little bit off of those two great responses. When I think of voice, I think of that there's this sense of like a unique consciousness that's coming through, like regardless of how it's sort of interacting with point of view or with character, that when I'm like drawn to write a piece, I say it's because I'm like compelled by a voice. And there's some sort of like energy there that has something to say. So it's like this sense of like energy and forward propulsion and like will. There's a will behind the words. And that's, sometimes I write something and it just sort of feels lifeless. And then I'll say, well, it doesn't really I don't know what the voice is. I don't know what the engine is. I don't know what the consciousness is or idea that's propelling it. And voice has this animation, and it can be animated by all different sorts of things. But it's like the thing that hooks me in first as a writer, and then hopefully is like the thing that also hooks in someone as a reader. But it's also so intricately like tied to style too. There are a lot of realist books out there that feel very voiceless to me, like they're kind of washed of voice, and they're like doing a whole different thing, and their concerns are very different than my concerns. So yeah, I love voice-driven stuff, and that's like what gets me going as an artist, but it's not what gets everyone going as artists or as readers.
And then I didn't warn you that I was going to ask this question, but I feel like every interviewer will ask this. What have you been reading? What are you enjoying now or recently? Other than each other's works, I know you've read each other's works. So we were talking about that earlier.
I can start. So I just read Call Me Zebra for the first time, and talking about voice driven. It's so voice driven. And I love, Rachel, what you're saying about consciousness, having a consciousness and a will. And this book, this narrator has such a will. She wants to write a manifesto of literature as it pertains to her family's trauma and exile. And she's so kooky. It's an incredible book. And then I also, for the first time, am reading Mating by Norman Rush. And so strange. I feel like I really was surprised that a man wrote such an incredible female narrator who also has the craziest, most incredible and compelling voice. It feels like he was kind of a spy, which is something my friend said and I loved. Yeah, so I'm still reading that and I'm pretty fascinated by it. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually just got this in the I went to the bookstore the other day and bought like a bunch of books. So I haven't delved into them, but it excited me that I went to our local bookstore and I was able to grab like 5 or 6 different books by Korean or Korean American authors, which just like blew my mind because that shit would have been impossible in most other years. And then also the one that I've been just reading for a couple of days is this Eternal Night at the Nature Museum by Tyler Barton, which came out on Saraband. Great, like an inventive short story collection. But I'm honestly really looking forward to just getting some free time to read, to be honest with you, because I just haven't had that time as of late. So
I just finished I Love You, But I've Chosen Darkness by Claire Bay Watkins, which like knocked me on my ass. It's so good. I loved it. And just so unapologetic and brilliantly written. So love that. I also have recently read Chouette by Claire Seçkin, which may be out today, if not next Tuesday. It comes out very soon. And it's about a mother who has an owl baby, and it's sort of a fairy tale. It's sort of a nightmare. It's night bitch adjacent, but also in many ways like the opposite of night bitch. It's a mother who entirely devotes herself to this sort of feral, special needs owl baby, and leaves her music. She's a musician. Yeah, so there's just like a lot of really interesting books coming out that are looking at motherhood in really interesting, like sort of slipstream ways. The School for Good Mothers by Jasmine Chan, which has gotten a lot of buzz, comes out early next year, is about a reform school there. Yeah, it's also absolutely stunning. And really fun to read. I mean, just like really fun conceits that sort of lead you into these books and into these new ways of talking about and telling stories about motherhood, which I really appreciate.
Definitely. Yes. The School for Good Mothers is so good. Expect it to be, I don't know if I'm allowed to say this. So Kathy, if you're listening, I'm sorry. It's going to be Tattered Cover's fiction book of the month in January. So if you're out there, you can buy it.
Should be.
Tattered Cover.
It should be. It's going to be everyone's so many book of the month, many book clubs.
So it's going to be, I know we have been really excited about it. It's another debut. And I know Tattered Cover, that's been a mission of ours since I definitely took over this position in July. We want more writers like you getting into the hands of readers. I'll wrap it up there. I want to thank you all for doing this. Can you let us know where we can find you all on the internet? Where should we follow you?
I'm at Twitter at Rachel Yoder, and on Instagram at Rayjoy, Raijoy, and I have my website too.
You can find me on Twitter at I forgot what my Twitter handle was for a second. Kwak3, and then on Instagram at Jean Michelle Basquiat, but the first name is spelled Gene.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Mina Seçkin, and then my Instagram handle is Little Butta.
I always love fun. I talk about this on whenever I have a podcast and someone has a fun Instagram name. I always bring that up, and all of yours are always fun. You can find tatteredcover.com. All of our social media is different. We couldn't get Tattered Cover for all of them, but Tattered Cover at Instagram, Twitter, Tattered Cover Bookstore on Instagram, obviously tatteredcover.com to buy all of your independent bookstore needs. My website, which I will plug, is Debeautiful. It will be in the chat. I have interviewed Jean on my podcast, Rachel on my podcast. Mina, I was going to, but then things got shifted around. So we will have something special with Mina by the end of the year. Trust me, these are 3 amazing books, and you will want to pay attention to them moving forward. Can I ask, and I usually don't, what's next? Are you working? Can you reveal something what you're working on, or no? Should I just skip this question because let's not even talk about it? What are y'all working on?
I'm taking my short story collection. We all have our short story collections, right? From our MFA time. And I'm revising it. Maybe it's a novel. I don't know. But it's the material in it is now compelling to me again. I mean, it's again very autofiction-y, but about a Mennonite girl who leaves the Mennonite commune and heads west. It's a coming of age story.
That sounds awesome.
Thanks. What are you working on, Mina?
I might be working on a story about someone who is obsessed with birds, and she falls in love with a great blue heron. So maybe in the Truette Night Bitch territory, I want to be called Birding for Boys, but I haven't figured it out yet.
Sounds really amazing.
We'll see.
Yeah, I wrote like 50 pages of this next novel, but I'm gonna scrap them and go back to them and start from scratch. But it's gonna be my first ever like long form thing about being Korean American. I wrote like maybe a short story years ago about being Korean American, but yeah, this will be my first attempt at that. And it's like a story about a dude and his grandmother. And yeah, and the title and product, I probably shouldn't even say this because it's just gonna change, or this might not even be the project, but the working title is King Grandma and the Handsome Bastard.
Ooh, I love it.
Nice. We love the pitch.
I love it.
Terrific. Well, Jean, Mina, and Rachel, thank you so much for being part of Tattered Cover's first debut panel. Like I said, this is something we want to do, and for three like juggernauts of 2021 to be here means a lot to me. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks so much.
Thank you to all the readers out there. This live stream will turn into just a YouTube video that will live on forever. I will email to all of you. Thank you for discovering some debuts you can devour with Tattered Cover. Thank you three again. Thank you everyone to my other screen over here, and have a great night.